Hi, George Rogers with Choice Skills. I'm your host for the Choice Skills Show and welcome you today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the idea that principles of morality are not governed, determined by personal opinion. Although apparently a large number of people seem to think so. In one study, as we discussed, up to 93% of Americans seem to think that their own judgment is the highest standard of morality that they have to guide them. I've discovered with my own judgment that was not a great standard. But beyond that, what I'd like to do is to share with you today a couple of fun examples, stories that I use in the 7 C's of Thinking Clearly that I think help young people to understand this concept a little bit better. And the concept being that principles of morality are governed by laws, natural laws that govern human interactions. For example, it doesn't really much matter whether you're in Bombay or someplace in Peru or California or Chicago or someplace else in the world. If you are taken advantage of, if somebody steals something of importance from you, and even things that sometimes aren't important, that's hurtful. And in the process, they've created an enemy. Now, it doesn't matter whether they think they're in the right or whether their personal opinion isn't going to hurt you. The fact is that it creates animosity, it creates divisions, it creates hostility between peoples and nations and so forth. And so, but let's look at this a little bit more fully in the following exercises.
In the volume for grades 2 through 6 of the 7 C's of Thinking Clearly is the story of Grimy Griswold. Since Grimy Griswold did not like to work, he never had any money of his own. But for Grimy, this was not a problem. Every Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, Grimy waited at the bank door with an empty wheelbarrow. When the bank opened for business, Grimy went inside and filled up his wheelbarrow with money from the bank's vault. He then took the money home and had enough to spend until the next Monday morning when he came back to the bank and got some more. Grimy was one of the most respected citizens in Mayfield. He was a friendly thief and was on the best of terms with the bank president, the people who kept their money in the bank, and especially Charlie, the local police officer. No one minded his taking the money, and Grimy lived very comfortably without working. And then we just ask the question, what's wrong with this picture? Children have no difficulty answering this question. In another exercise, students are asked to identify this individual. He was born in 1847 and fought with Quantrill's guerrillas during the Civil War. Shortly after the war, he and his brother Frank formed a band of outlaws. Their first job was the bank at Liberty, Missouri, in which they made away with $58,000. But during that robbery, there was a great irony that took place. A young student, college student, by the name of George Wymore, was killed. He and another student were walking by at the time of the robbery. Interestingly enough, this individual's father had founded the William and Jewel College that Wymore was attending in Liberty. He was on the loose for nearly 16 years, terrorizing people throughout the Midwest, robbing banks and trains and stagecoaches from Mexico to Minnesota. Then things started to go bad for them. The law started to catch up with them, and eventually this individual was killed by a member of his own gang, Bob Ford, who shot him in the back. So we ask who this person is. If you haven't guessed, it was Jesse James. Well, as it is, the practice of thievery or robbery or stealing, whatever you want to call it, never began with Jesse James, nor did it end with him. And examples are all around us. Obviously, it's a major theme in books and movies. We have recorded events in history, and certainly in our daily news, we're frequently recording experiences of people who've been taken advantage of. And most of us sometimes have had a personal experience with this. And the fact is, whether it's for a lot or little, it's always an unpleasant experience, and creates animosity between those who are involved. The annual cost is literally in the billions of dollars, and the sense of personal loss and violation that people feel can't even be estimated. And there's so many different ways in which this can take place that it's not even any point in enumerating them. Let's just say that there's numerous ways in which people can take advantage of others to the hurt of those. So what is the moral law associated with stealing? It was given thousands of years ago on Mount Sinai and is recorded in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 15. Thou shalt not steal. It's a moral law, and it applies to every individual wherever they live and whatever they do. Violation of this law is an explanation for a great many of the problems that influence our society and people throughout the world. And unfortunately, I have a friend who works for the district attorney's office as an attorney, and he reports to me that a very large percentage of these kinds of crimes are committed by people who are addicted to drugs. And that's another tragedy that we'll be talking about in our next presentation. If you're interested in learning more about the 7 C's of thinking clearly, I invite you to visit our website at www.choiceskills.com. That's www.choiceskills.com. I look forward to talking with you again in our next episode, and best wishes.